Folks, while you're heading to your seat, I'm just going to start off with the Walpole Media TV announcement here. We're pleased to be providing live coverage of this this afternoon's town meeting on Comcast Channel 22 and Verizon Channel 30. Live streaming of this meeting is also available on YouTube by going to the Walpole Media channel. And you can watch the replay of this meeting anytime by going to the website walpolemedia.tv and clicking the on-demand button. It does say 3 times, just so you know in the script. That's why I always do it 3 times. Good morning, my name is Dan Bruce. For those of you who don't know me, Walpole's Town Moderator. Welcome to the Walpole 2021 Fall Annual Town Meeting. There being a quorum of over 76 members being present, please come to order. For those of you who are curious, we had 132 just a moment ago. Does the clerk attest to the return of the warrant? Yes, she does. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Folks, it's I know times are, we're still outdoors. We did have a rain check to go indoors. Looks like Mother Nature's gonna hold out for us. It's a nice crisp day, but I'm still going to err on the side of caution and reserve our time for essential discussion and debate. But I'm going to add back a couple of ceremonies here in order to just start to return to that, I'll call it the new normal. But first, before I get into that, we have 2 new RTM members that were elected by caucus this morning. In Precinct 1, we have Brian Foley. Brian, where are you? Thank you, Brian, and welcome. In Precinct 3, we have Jennifer Hughley. Thank you, Jennifer. Congratulations and welcome to both of you. We have 1 new department head since our spring meeting, Scott Gustafson, the sewer and water superintendent, who has his crew working outside my neighbor's house restoring my water service. That was a nice wake-up call this morning. Next to my left are Town Council Attorney Lauren Goldberg, Town Administrator Jim Johnson, and Chairman of the Select Board Mark Gallivan. At the next table, we have the Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Bridget Goff, School Committee and School Building Committee, Mark Breen, and from Compass Project Management Term, Brian Jarvis. And I also see Mike Frisha down there, Bill Buckley, and I think I've got everybody, do I? Yep. To my right is Finance Committee Chairman Mark Trudell. And we also have with us today, and I'm going to turn the microphone over to him now. If you want to come down to one of the microphones there, Mr. Lynch. Congressman Lynch is here with us today. He's going to give us a few remarks.
Good morning. Thank you, Dan. Mr. Moderator, I appreciate it. I know you've got a lot of items on the warrant, so I'm not going to give a full congressional report. I'm going to give a very abbreviated report. As you know, we were able to get $2.2 million for the town of Walpole in the CARES Act. I understand the deadline is sometime in December for deciding how to spend that. Also, we were able to get $7.5 million for the town of Walpole in the American Rescue Plan Act, the other federal piece for COVID relief. And we intentionally left that discretionary for the town, as to each and every town in America was received that money based on population. But the needs were so diverse across the country that we thought it might be wisest to allow the towns to decide what their most important priorities were. Right now in D.C., we are negotiating this major transportation and infrastructure bill. There's one group at $3.5 trillion. There's another group at $2 trillion. Either way you look at it, it's an awful lot of money. I think it's very, very important that we make sure we spend it wisely and that we get input from local cities, towns, and the states to make sure we address their priorities and not simply try to mandate expenditures at the federal level. We will figure it out. We're at a point now. I met with President Biden about 10 days ago. He is well aware that we need to compromise in order to get something done in the best interest of the American people. So that's the attitude he has taken. That's the attitude I'm taking, and I'm looking forward to getting that resolved. That's all I have. I can save the rest till the next time we have another Walpole town meeting. I just want you to know that I'm enormously proud to represent you in Congress, and every day I try to live up to your highest expectations. Thank you so much for being involved in Walpole town meeting. This is really where democracy happens. I learn a lot when I come to Walpole town meeting, and it helps me be a better representative on your behalf. So God bless you all. Good luck today, and I'm sure you'll come to the right decision collectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Lynch. Folks, as you all know, town meeting doesn't happen without the efforts of many, many people, but I'm going to still keep it short and sweet. Thanks to each and every one of you. You know who you are. We really appreciate what you do to help bring this meeting forward. So, folks, just a quick reminder, again, I know times are moving on, but let's maintain a healthy and safe environment. It's a nice, cool, little breeze here today, so I apologize to those of you who don't like the cool weather, but it's not cold, right? So, but still be aware of the sun, stay hydrated. There's plenty of water around at spots. If you need some, just, make sure you get up. If you have to use the restrooms, you know where they are. We will not take a scheduled break other than to do the bylaws committee, which has to be done every 5 years. I'll bring that up at a certain time down the road. So again, no set breaks. So if you need to take a break, you'll just have to choose to go on your own. Down to the speaking, if you'd like to make a comment, again, there's 4 microphones down front, way over at the end where Congressman Lynch just was, and a couple over here. So please go to the one that's closest to you. As a reminder, all motions to amend were due to me yesterday. When you are recognized to speak, even if I know you or you've been up multiple times, please identify yourself by name and precinct. Address your remarks to me. A lot of times we slip into that and we start having a one-on-one Q&A. That's not allowed, so please address your questions to me, and I will ask the appropriate official for a response. All members that wish to speak on an article will be limited, as we have been in our practice, to 3 minutes. You can always ask for more time. If you know you're going to need it, ask up front. If you don't, just ask at the end. I'm hoping there's going to be a lot of healthy debate. We know we have at least one article that's probably going to get quite a few of us up and talking, which I look forward to. I ask that there'll be no repeat unless you have new information to offer, and if you do, you will be kept to the back. I always try to bring and have as many speakers as possible before we go back to seconds. Voice voting will be the primary method of voting. We'll be using the red and green voting cards, so don't let them blow away. They really help the display with us, and so you should have received them. If you don't have them, please raise your hand and we'll get something to you. But as usual, if I'm unable to call a voice vote, we'll go to a standing vote. We have 6 tellers. In the center, we have Jean Kenny and Jane Bergen. On my right, we have Allie Hamilton and Katie Turco of 80. On my left, we have Pat Hinton and Mike McGrath, but Mr. Hinton wanted me to remind everybody it's just my left, it's not his left. So he doesn't like to be associated with that term. Again, if there's a standing vote, I will first count the tellers by a show of hands, and then they'll count the standing vote, the ayes first and then the nays. The tellers shall coordinate their accounts and then announce them from the microphone. Once everybody's ready, the town clerk and I will independently tally all votes and determine whether the quantum has been met. I'm going to do something a little different here. I'm going to save you all the trouble. All those that would like a roll call for Article 14, please stand. I need 20 members. All right, we got more than 20. Thank you. So when we go to Article 14, just to try to keep things moving along, I had a couple members talk to me, so I figured I'd just take it and bring it up right now. So Article 14, whenever that is, we will have a roll call vote. It's an honor for me to serve as moderator for the town of Walpole. I assure you that this and all town meetings will be run as efficiently and fairly as possible. As you know, I have no particular vote that would influence the outcome of any particular article. So before we dive in, any questions or comments at this time? All right. I'm going to ask you to please rise now and remain standing. I'm going to read a resolution, and then I'll pause for a moment of silence and read the next resolution. The first one is for Roger Turner Jr. Resolved that we, representative town meeting members, inscribe upon the record of the fall annual town meeting of October 23rd, 2021, our recognition and sincere appreciation of the contribution rendered by the late Roger Turner Jr., who passed away on June 2nd, 2021, as a member of the Civil Defense Emergency Agent Management, 1992 to 2021, a member of the Conservation Committee from 1999 to 2020, as a member of the Historical Commission from 2007 to 2021, a member of the Ponds Committee 1998 and 2005 to 2011, as an elected Sewer and Water Commissioner from 2002 to 2017, and then as a representative town meeting member from 2003 to 2011. And further, in acknowledgement of the town's loss, we request to observe a moment of silence in Roger's memory. And further, that the town clerk shall be instructed to send a copy of this resolution to Roger's family. Moment of silence. Thank you. Resolved that we, representative town meeting members, inscribe upon the record of the fall annual town meeting of October 23rd, 2021, our recognition and sincere appreciation of the contributions rendered by the late Edward P. Damish, who passed away on July 27th, 2021, as a representative town meeting member from 1971 to 74 in Precinct 4, and as a town meeting member in Precinct 3 for 32 years. And further, in acknowledgement of the town's loss, we request the moderator observe a moment of silence in Edward's memory, and further, that the town clerk be instructed to send a copy of this resolution to Edward's family. A moment of silence. Thank you. You may be seated. At this point in time, I have a preliminary motion and a second from the Finance Committee to waive the reading of the warrant. Any questions or comments? There being none, the Finance Committee's motion require a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed? It is a vote, a unanimous vote. I have another properly seconded motion that all motions of the Finance Committee be the main motion. Questions or comments? There being none, this also requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed? It is a vote. We will now proceed to Article 1, which is a general article that remains open throughout town meeting. In Article 1, it is moved that the town will hear and act on the report of any committee or choose any committee the town think proper and transact any other business that may legally come before the town. We have some brief comments from Katie Turco-Abady on behalf of the Walpole Master Plan Committee. Ms. Abady.
Thank you. The Master Plan Steering Committee is a committee comprised of 13 members, 2 of them being from Planning Board, and I am one of the Planning Board representatives. The other one is Phil Chekorowski. For those who don't know, the Master Plan is the town's vision of what we want to achieve in the future. It states our goals. For example, some of the items mentioned in the past master plan were updating our library, police station, fire station, and senior center. It is time to update the master plan and the planning board is charged per Mass General Law with overseeing this task. We, along with the 11 members of various boards, are participating in the steering committee guided by a consultant hired by the town, and Pat Deschaines helping us out. Now that the important part that I bring to you today is that in order for this process to be successful, we need broad community participation. We need to hear from everyone. We need to hear from you. We need to hear from your neighbors. We need to hear from seniors. We need to hear from young people. We need the people you love, the people you hate. We need to hear from everyone. We will have lots more information to come, and we will have both in-person and virtual opportunities to participate. But right now, I would like to bring your attention to our first in-person meeting, which will take place on November 17th at Walpole High School from 7 to 9 p.m. in the cafeteria. I ask you to please try to come and participate and give your opinions so that this is a broad view of what we want for the future and not just a few people's input. So please really consider taking the time. Please be aware of our future meetings and talk it up with your neighbors and friends. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Abadi. As we have no further reports at this time, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Our rules provide for the moderator to make use of a consent agenda comprised of articles which generate no apparent controversy and could be voted on properly as one unit without debate. The consent agenda was sent out to you all with via email with article numbers and the Finance Committee vote listed this week. I will read the article numbers again here with a brief description. If any member objects to the inclusion of any article in the consent agenda, that article will be removed and acted upon separately in its normal course of the warrant. So if you have an objection, please rise and state that when I get to that article. The first article in the consent agenda, Article 8, this is an appropriation for street and drainage improvements. It's an annual fall appropriation for street paving and drainage improvements from Chapter 90 funds, plus some incidental free cash. There's a list of streets that I provided with that. The Finance Committee vote was favorable, 14-0-0. Article 13, an appropriation for reimbursement to the school budget. This is the annual transfer of Medicaid reimbursement and student fees parking to the school budget. The Finance Committee vote was favorable, 14-0-0. And the last one is Article 15, street acceptances. There were two, Emerald Way and Olmsted Lane. The Finance Committee vote was favorable, 13-0-0. Yes, Mr. Lee? You'd like this held? Okay, then Article 15 will be removed and taken up in its normal course of action later in the the meeting. So we're just going to be voting on Articles 18 and 13 in the consent agenda. 8 and 13, thank you. What did I say, 18 and 13? 8 and 13. So all those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. Thank you. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. It is a unanimous vote. Thank you, folks. Bear with me one sec here while I take Article 15 out and move it back. Okay. Article 2. This is a motion from the Select Board. Mr. O'Leary?
John O'Leary, Precinct 3. I have a motion to move Article 9 before Article 2, since the results of Article 9 may influence the votes for Article 2.
Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. So, folks, we have a motion by Mr. O'Leary to advance Article 9 to be the next article up for consideration. This requires a majority vote. Is there any discussion or debate? Mr. O'Leary has stated that he's looking for this to be brought up because he feels that there's a relationship between Article 2 and Article 9. Any further questions or comments? There being none, all those in favor of moving Article 9 to be the next article up for discussion, please raise your green cards and say yay.
Yay.
All those opposed, please raise your red card and say no. It is a favorable vote, so we will now take up Article 9. Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. Article 9 is a petition of the Select Board. It is an appropriation and borrowing authorization for infrastructure and infrastructure and equipment. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to appropriate the sum of $1,825,000 for the following projects, including the payment of all incidental and related costs: to resurface various roadways, sidewalks, and parking lots, $1,050,000. Replace, including equipment of fire engines, $775,000. And to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Select Board, is authorized to borrow said amount under and pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 7(1), or pursuant to any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the town therefore. That any premium received by the town upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this vote, less any such premium applied to the payment of the cost of issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to the payment of costs approved by this vote in accordance with Chapter 44, Section 20 of the General Laws, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such costs by a like amount. And further, that the Select Board is authorized to take any other action necessary and convenient to carry out this project. Mr. Trudell, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action, 13-1-0.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. Mr. Gallivan, the Board of Selectmen vote.
Select Board voted favorable action, 4-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Gallivan. And Mr. Forsberg, the Capital Budget vote.
Mr. Moderator, the Capital Budget Committee voted favorable action, 7-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Forsberg. Are any questions or comments with regards to Article 9? There being none, this requires a 2/3 vote as it is a borrowing. All those in favor, please raise your green card and say yay.
Yay.
Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your red card and say no. I declare a 2/3 vote. The motion has passed. Article 2. Again, this is a petition of the Select Board. It is for adjustments to the current year operating budget. We have a substitute motion for this, Mr. O'Leary. Is that correct? It's right here if he keeps it.
John O'Leary, Precinct 3. Due to the positive vote on Article 9, I withdraw the substitute motion since it is, the original motion is in link with parts of Article 9 vote.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. So Article 2, again, adjustments to the current year operating budget. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town raise and appropriate from taxation the sum of $430,000 to defray additional town and incidental expenses of the town for fiscal year 2022, which commenced on July 1st, 2021, and to distribute that amount to the following budgets as follows. Election salaries, $12,000. Elections expense, $18,000. Legal expenses, $50,000. Fire salaries, $102,000. Fire expenses, $248,000. Mr. Trudell, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action, 13-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. Mr. Gallivan, the Select Board.
Select Board voted favorable action, 4-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Gallivan. Any questions or comments with regard to Article 2? There being none, this requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. It is a unanimous vote. Article 3. This is an appropriation to the OPEB fund. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to transfer from free cash the sum of $716,914 for the purpose of supplementing the fund known as the Other Post-Employment Benefits Liability Trust, OPEB, as otherwise authorized by Chapter 32B, Section 20 of the Mass General Laws. This is a petition of the Select Board. Mr. Trudell, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action, 13-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. And Mr. Gallivan, Select Board vote.
Select Board voted favorable action, 4-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Gallivan. Any questions or comments with regard to Article 3? There being none, this requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. Thank you. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. It is a unanimous vote. Thank you, folks. Article 4. This is an appropriation to the stabilization fund. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to transfer from free cash the sum of $1 million for the purpose of supplementing the stabilization fund as authorized by Chapter 40, Section 5B of the Massachusetts General Laws. This is a petition of the Select Board. Mr. Trudell, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action, 13-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. And Mr. Gallivan, the Select Board vote.
Select Board voted favorable action, 4-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Gallivan. Any questions or comments with regards to Article 4? There being none, this requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. Thank you. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. It is a unanimous vote. Article 5. This is an appropriation to the Capital Stabilization Fund. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to transfer from free cash the sum of $1 million for the purpose of supplementing the Capital Stabilization Fund as authorized by Chapter 40, Section 5B of the Massachusetts General Laws. This is a petition of the Select Board. Mr. Trudell, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action, 13-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. Mr. Gallivan, the Select Board vote.
Select Board voted favorable action, 4-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Gallivan. Any questions or comments with regards to Article 5? There being none, this motion requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. Thank you. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. It is a unanimous vote. Article 6. Capital infrastructure improvements. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to transfer funds from the following sources to implement a capital improvement program to protect, improve, and/or modify the physical infrastructure, including but not limited to treatment plants, sewer pump stations, traffic design, turf replacement facilities, and other properties of the town of Walpole as listed in the sheet titled Fall Capital 2021 Capital Budget that can be found in the town meeting member packet for Article 6 under the columns entitled Funding Source and FinCom Recom. And further, that the Select Board is authorized to take any other action necessary or convenient to carry out these projects, all as follows. The sum of $4,390,000 from free cash and the sum of $27,295 from previously approved capital projects. This is a petition of the Select Board. Mr. Trudell, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action 14-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. And Mr. Gallivan, the Select Board vote.
Select Board voted favorable action 4-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Gallivan. And Mr. Forsberg, the Capital Budget vote.
Mr. Moderator, Capital Budget Committee voted favorable action 7-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Forsberg. Any questions or comments with regards to Article 6? Mr. O'Leary.
John O'Leary, Precinct 3. Some questions for clarification, please, through you, Mr. Moderator. Under the Parks Department, the new playground equipment, is that for one location, several locations? Can that be further explained?
Sure. Mr. Johnson?
Yes, that is for the Carolyn Woodward Playground, which is in the center of town, right in back of Town Hall, right next to the center pool. We're looking to add and update the playground equipment there to make it handicapped accessible for other kids, and I have a list of attractions that we're going to build into that, but that's what it's specifically for.
Is that strictly the area right on the corner next to the pool, the children's pool?
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
That seems a large amount for such a small area.
Mr. Johnson?
I can give you a reference. So we've gotten some quotes to build a playground up at the new Fields site. They've come in between $450 and $650 just for that site alone. Okay. I'm actually pleasantly surprised with the work that Justin and his team have done. We're going to be purchasing this equipment through the state bid list, so it's a discounted price.
Thank you. Let's see. Now I can see. The bridge rehabilitation design on Elm Street, is that the railroad bridge or is that another bridge we're talking about?
Mr. Johnson?
That's actually the bridge right at the corner of East Street and Elm, right on 27 right there. That bridge has not been maybe 50, 60 years old. It's in need of renovation, but we don't know what the cost is, so this is the design. We'll get the bid specs. We'll have the bids in hand next time we come back to town meeting.
Is that something the town will have to get permission to modify through whoever owns it, or through you,
Mr. Johnson?
That is a town-owned structure.
Thank you. There's a line item under engineering for bridge study master plan. Is that just generic town-wide or particular to a individual bridge, Mr. Moderator?
It's town-wide.
And the drainage study areas 1 through 5, could you further provide more information?
Mr. Johnson?
Sure. Specifically, we actually have 10 different areas, and I worked with Carl, the town engineer, and Rick Mattson, DPW director. I don't know which specific areas those are, but we're trying to phase this in because it is costly. Walpole's bridges are, haven't been addressed. We've addressed some of the more larger projects through some of the buildings, but it's time for us to start to address it. That's why we have June Street on here, the infrastructure with the bridge, Elm Street.
No, my question was for the drainage study.
So with the drainage study, I don't know the specific area. Rick or Carl, if you don't mind, Mr. Moderator, if he is.
It's quite all right. Rick? Carl? Jim, it's me. I try to turn mine. That's why apologies, folks. You're going to keep hearing the click because I seem to be causing some feedback.
Carl Bald of Town Engineer, Department of Public Works. The areas are School Street right in front of the Town Hall, the bridges under Route 27 and West Street, also Hemlock, and I am at a loss for a couple of the other areas, but they're Washington and Common Street. They're basically very simple requirements for consistently, regularly flooding areas that we want to analyze and try and find a solution for.
Thank you. Under school department, could I get further explanation on the second item, Walpole High School driveways, parking lot extension, design and construction? What would that entail?
Mr. Fisher?
Mike Frisch, School Business Administrator. The driveway would protect students that are running across the street to the other side of Common Street or getting rides in the afternoon. The initial proposal that we're thinking of would be a driveway that runs parallel to Common Street, entering by the service entrance, keeping the queuing of cars off Common Street and inside the high school grounds, thereby protecting students who run between those cars that are currently queuing on Common Street. This was a concern of the Walpole Police Department as well as the school administration.
So if I'm understanding you, from the existing front driveway, you're basically going to be extending it and creating an entrance closer to the service entrance, up closer to, I can't think of the street next to Mass Ave. So you're extending that so more cars can get off of Common Street. Is that
Mr.
the
Fisher?
intention?
Correct. It runs parallel to Common Street where the trees are currently. It would run parallel to those trees back to the service entrance.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. Mr. O'Connell?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Moderator. Bill O'Connell, Precinct 4. Just a general comment and a question, just with respect to the free cash that we currently have. Just looking at the Walpole annual town reports for the last 10 years, I think we've had an average of $5.4 million in free cash. This year we have approximately over $9 million in free cash. Congressman Lynch just referenced that the town's receiving close to $10 million in COVID relief funds, either through the CARES Act. My understanding too is there may be some more money coming in through Norfolk County. I'm not sure that's part of that, but my concern is just, again, with respect to protection of the taxpayers. With this free cash, the town is obviously borrowing a substantial amount of money. We just had an article that referenced some borrowing. There's more. The Water and Sewer Department, maybe Article 12,
Mr. O'Connell,
is borrowing money.
Excuse me, just this article is not about borrowing. I understand your reference, but keep it focused to this article, and I'll allow you to continue.
Sure.
But we're not talking about borrowing
it's
here.
just a comment, Mr. Moderator, but...
Understood. Just keeping
Yep.
you on course with the article.
But again, my concern is with respect to the protection of the taxpayers, to make sure that some of this free cash is being used. Obviously, it's going to be addressed later on in the middle school. And I did have one question through you, Mr. Moderator. I don't know if the Blackburn roof is part of Article 6. I didn't see it, but and I'm not sure who would answer that question. I think there was some Blackburn renovations, and I'm just wondering what the status is of what's going to happen to Blackburn. It seems like a lot of money. I think it was over $400,000. And again, I apologize. I'm not sure it's part of this article, but I wonder if anyone could clarify that.
Jim, is that part of this article? It is?
Apologize. I do have a couple of comments in regards to free cash.
You may actually respond to the free cash.
So in regards to free cash, yes, we've been, over the last few years, we've been conservative in our budgeting. That's paid off because we've been able to fund projects like $1.5 million for the school study that you're going to consider under Article 14. We put away $3 million in stabilization, which is our rainy day account. We've built that account up to almost 10% of the operating budget, most of it through free cash. So we've been able to offset some of those things, and we've actually spent it on the taxpayers. This body has come and appropriated those funds with the recommendation of FinCom, Select Board, and the Capital Budget Committee. So We're in a good situation, Walpole. We have, we're in a good spot with our savings accounts in case that rainy day ever has to come, which we thought it was gonna come during COVID. So, in regards to Blackburn Hall, there was some improvements there that are projected. We're looking to take off the slate roof and replace it with a metal roof. We're also going to install air conditioning in the upper level for activities and most importantly for voting during those hot June days.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Administrator. What are the long-term plans, if I may, Mr. Moderator, through you for Blackburn? What is the life expectancy of the building, and is it worth putting a substantial amount of money in at this point?
Jim, do you want to answer that, or you want to go to your?
Sure. As far as the long-term plans for Blackburn, the town was deeded that property, and I forget the name of the family that gave it back to the town in the early 1900s. It was specifically for recreation, parks usage, so we have to keep it active per the deed. Long-term, I think we're going to continue to run voting out of there because it's a central location. If certain things go with other buildings, we may move some recreation activities out of that building. We can't run basketball out of there. That auditorium is very nice, but it's actually small and limited. But long-term, we're not going to mothball the building and will continue to be used.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connell. Ms. Khatib?
Sarah Khatib, Precinct 8. Just a question on the parking lot design at the high school, and what Joe Moraski had brought up at the FinCom hearing. Are there plans to prevent high school students from parking near the senior center and police station with these improvements, or has that been addressed?
Mr. Frischer, do you want to give that a shot?
Incorporated within the driveway design for safety will be additional parking spots. We're working on some ideas that we have related to that. That should prevent what you're talking about as far as parking at the senior center.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Khatib. Mr. Lee?
Joseph Lee, Precinct 7. I just have two questions. As far as the streetlight conversion, I'm assuming we're going to LEDs?
Mr. Johnson?
That is correct.
And what is the break-even year on the savings that we'll get on this $800,000?
Mr. Johnson?
Actually, it depends on how much of a discount we're able to realize here. As part of that $800,000, that covers the town to purchase the lights, to convert everything over. But I'm optimistic that we'll be back here next fall looking to reappropriate these funds towards other projects. I don't think it's going to cost the whole $800,000. Conservatively, I think it could cost $400,000, but I want to make sure we have all the costs built into there. We're working with the people from Eversource and the people from the DEP at the state level to get them to cover a lot of the costs there. So I don't want to be put in a spot. But we did an analysis, and we figured if we appropriated this money, we'd have it all. We would have made up for it within 7 years.
Understood. And, okay, thank you. And I had one other question under building maintenance, painting and demolishing. What are we painting and what are we demolishing?
Mr. Johnson?
The bulk of the money is going towards the bell tower and the cupola clock hands inside the building. This is for the old town hall, I'm sorry. We're going to demo the dispatch area, which is the area that you used to walk right in the booking area, to make it more usable and attractive to potential investors. Originally, my recommendation was for 130 capital budget, and the FinCom went along with an increase of about 50 or so thousand. We want to see that building put to use again. However, we put it out to bid 2 different times. We were hoping to get some type of a restaurant or a brewery or some type of retail space in there. We put it in the Globe. We put it in the Central Register. We haven't had much of an interest. We've had a couple of tire kickers, but the response we've always gotten back is, well, I just have to put too much into that building. So we're trying to make it more attractive, more of a blank slate for investors to go in and put some type of retail space in there. They'd have to do a long-term license agreement with the select board, because obviously I don't think many people in town want to see that building sold, but they'd like to see it put to a better use than just emergency management right now.
Thank you. One final question, based on what you just said. What would we expect to earn in rent on that building in a year?
Mr. Johnson?
I would be happy with covering the cost and heat, to heat and all the utilities at this point.
And the sorry.
Right now, we've gotten no response, and it was more of a blank slate, so.
Understood. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
And thank you, Mr. Lee. Any further questions or comments with regards to Article 6?
Hi,
Yeah.
Liz Barrows, Precinct 1. It's not money, but not much money, but what is the 50,000 for the Recreation Department strategic plan and feasibility study?
Mr. Johnson?
Sure. This matter came up earlier this summer when we were losing substantial water from the South Pool. I met there with the Assistant Town Administrator, the Rec Director, the Director of Building Maintenance. And we said, what's the long-term plan here with this pool, center pool? They were built in the early 1900s, and I said, we really need to get some type of a master plan, like we did with the facilities plan in 2013 and like we did with the fields plan in 2010, to actually know what we have for inventory here, what type of improvements, estimates-wise, we need to make in these buildings and these facilities. So it's really for us to get together a comprehensive list and start to figure out what direction, because the pools are going to be a substantial cost if and when we need to replace those in future years.
Okay. Does that involve the use of Blackburn, like determining what that will be moving forward?
Mr. Johnson?
Blackburn will be included in there.
Okay. And so I guess I'm wondering why we're allocating the 200, or no, it was 332 for the playground that's there. I assume that's under the Recreation Department budget. So we're going to do that prior to doing a feasibility study for all of the Parks and Recreation.
Mr. Johnson?
There's been an identified need at the Carolyn Woodward Playground for some time. I think the last time it was updated was in 1993. We do not have any public handicap accessible playground equipment here in Walpole right now at the time. I think it's important to make sure that all kids are created equally and are able to have as much fun as any other kid may have. And the need is there. We're aware of the need, and I don't think we're in a good spot. We can address it now, and I don't think we should ignore it any longer.
Okay. And my last question, for the school departments, 200,000 for the playground, elementary playgrounds, is that going to make them all ADA accessible as well?
Mr. Frischem?
Yes, I believe that is the case.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Barrows. Any further questions or comments with regards to Article 6? There being none, this motion requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. All opposed, please say no and raise your red card. It is a unanimous vote. Article 7. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to appropriate the total sum of $1,322,793 from free cash and ambulance receipts for the reserved for appropriation in the amounts set forth below for the purchase and equipping of capital equipment, including but not limited to vehicles, machinery, and computer network systems for the various departments of the town of Walpole, all as more specifically listed in the fall 2021 capital budget found in the town meeting member packet for Article 7 under the columns entitled Funding Source and FinCom Recom. And further, that the Select Board is authorized to take any other action necessary or convenient to carry out these projects. The sum of $263,008 from ambulance receipts and the sum of $1,059,785 from free cash. This is a petition of the Select Board. Mr. Trudell, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action 14-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. Mr. Gallivan, the Select Board vote.
Select Board voted favorable action 4-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Gallivan. And Mr. Forsberg, Capital Budget vote.
Capital Budget voted favorable action 7-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Forsberg. Any questions or comments with regard to Article 7? Mr. O'Leary.
John O'Leary, Precinct 3, through you, Mr. Moderator. A few questions. First one, under the Select Board, could someone explain what this training is for? Or?
Mr. Johnson?
This would be to have someone from the National League of Cities and Towns come in to provide some equity and diversity training for the various department heads in town.
So it isn't so much the Select Board as the town administration, the people, department heads.
Yes.
Yes.
Townwide.
Thank you. Under vehicle maintenance, the first item is $420,000. It references 2006 Sterling dump and sander. Is that replacing this 2006 vehicle? Is that what we're looking at?
Mr. Johnson?
Correct.
My question further is the sander inherent to the vehicle, or is this dump truck available for use other portions of the year?
Mr. Johnson?
It's actually a new piece of equipment that we've never purchased before. It's going to be multifunctional. It's going to have a dump body on it, a sander body on it, a de-icing capability, and I think basically a flatbed / low bed option to add on there. So it's different types of beds. The truck will be able to dump, take the piece of the dump body off, go back, move over, and hook over the de-icer. And it allows for a lot of flexibility in the winter when most of the dump trucks are tied up with sanders on them.
Thank you. Under Highway Department, there's a listing for 2,500 gallon storage tank for snow and ice. Could someone explain where that would be located?
Mr. Johnson?
That would be located down at the DPW facility.
I'm assuming that'll be within a contained area where it can't leach into the surrounding water resource areas?
Certainly. It definitely will.
Under public safety, there's a listing for portable AEDs. Could someone explain what that is?
Mr. Johnson?
Those are the AEDs that are in the cruisers.
AED, I don't understand the term.
AED, there's actually one right behind, I'm sorry.
It's the defibrillator.
Defibrillator, okay,
Yes.
thank you. And the listing for the mountain bikes, how many bikes does that represent?
Mr. Johnson?
I'm looking at Interim Chief Kelleher. Is it
Yep.
5 or 10?
Chief, 5 or 10?
Good morning, Rich Keller, Interim Police Chief. 6, actually.
6, thank you.
Thank you, Chief. That was the 3-minute timer, folks.
Under school department, classroom blinds repair and replacement. Which schools does that involve?
Mr. Johnson or Mr. Frisha?
It involves all 4 of the elementary schools.
Okay, thank you. And this may relate back to what Liz's question was. The 50,000 under Recreation Department strategic planning, that had to do with the pools, is that correct?
Is that the same, Mr. Johnson?
That is correct.
Yes.
Thank you. That's it, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. Any further questions or comments on Article 7? There being none, this motion requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. All opposed, please say no and raise your red card. It is a favorable, this motion has passed. Article 10. This is for capital water retained earnings. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to appropriate the total sum of $911,000 from water retained earnings for the purchase and equipping of capital equipment and infrastructure, including but not limited to vehicles, machinery, and computer network systems, all more specifically listed in the fall 2021 capital budget found in the town meeting member packet for Article 10 under the columns entitled Funding Source and FinCom Recom. Fall 2021 capital budget for Article 10 under the column titled FinCom Recon. That is a duplicate, sorry folks. And further, that the Select Board is authorized to take any other action necessary or convenient to carry out these projects. This is a petition of the Sewer and Water Commission. Mr. Trudell, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action 12-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. And Mr. Gallivan, the Select Board vote.
Select Board voted favorable action 4-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Gallivan. And Mr. Forsberg, capital budget.
Capital budget voted favorable action 7-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Forsberg. And for sewer and water is Mr. Spillane. Do you have the sewer and water vote? Oh, Mr. Hasenjager, do you have the vote for sewer and water and Mr. Spillane's? Or Mr. Abbott? And we've got actually 3 articles coming up in a row. Would one of you handle those for me?
Hasenjager, Sewer and Water Commission. Vote was 4-1.
And favorable?
Favorable action.
Was it 4-0-1, Mr. Hasenjager? I apologize.
No, 4-1-0.
4-1-0, thank you. Sir.
Pradeep Mishra, Precinct 1. I have a question for meter system components, which is $250K in water and $100K in sewer. It's $350K total. It says that it will improve timely water meter readings for billing and accountability purposes. The water and billings are late in the town of Walpole. We get late billings every month, like 45 days late. Can town administrator tell us that this fund will be used to fix that issue?
Mr. Johnson, you going to answer that, or you want to go to sewer and water?
I'll answer it, and then I can go to Mr. Abbott and Mr. Hasenjager. Mr. Mashra, as a member of the Sewer and Water Commission, you will be one of 5 people voting and directing myself and the water people what to do with these funds. So we'll take direction from you and the rest of the commission. I understand you do have some concerns about the billing and the length of the building. We've tried to address those over the last year. We've actually reduced those significantly. We'll continue to do as much as we can on that. And I don't know if Bill or John has any further comments.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mishra. Any other further questions or comments with regards to Article 10? There being none, this motion requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. It is, motion has passed favorably. Article 11. This is for capital sewer retained earnings. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to appropriate the total sum of $1,020,000 from sewer retained earnings for the purchase and equipping of capital equipment and infrastructure, including but not limited to vehicles, machinery, and computer network systems, all as more specifically listed in the fall 2021 capital budget found in the town meeting member packet for Article 11 under the columns titled Funding Source and FinCom Recon, and further that the Select Board is authorized to take any other action necessary or convenient to carry out these projects. This is a petition of the Sewer and Water Commissions. Mr. Trudell, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action 12-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. Mr. Gallivan, the Select Board vote.
Select Board voted favorable action 4-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Gallivan. And Mr. Forsberg, capital budget.
Capital budget voted favorable action 7-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Forsberg. And Mr. Hassenjäger, Sewer and Water.
Hassenjäger, Sewer and Water. The vote was favorable, 4-1-0.
Thank you, Mr. Hassenjäger. Any questions or comments with regards to Article 11? There being none, this motion requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. All opposed, please say no and raise your red card. The motion has passed. It is a favorable vote. Article 12. This is for capital water borrowing. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to appropriate $2,800,000 to pay the costs of water main replacements, including the payment of all incidental and related costs. And to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the select board, is authorized to borrow said amount under and pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 7 or 8, or pursuant to any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the town therefore. Any premium received by the town upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this vote, less any premium applied to the payment of the cost of issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to the payment cost approved by this vote in accordance with Chapter 44, Section 20 of the general laws, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such costs by a like amount. And further, that the Select Board is authorized to take any other action necessary and convenient to carry out this project. This is a petition of the Sewer and Water Commission. Mr. Trudell, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action, 12-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. And Mr. Gallivan, the Select Board vote.
Select Board voted favorable action, 4-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Gallivan. Mr. Forsberg, Capital Budget vote.
Capital Budget voted favorable actions 7-0-0. And Mr. Moderator, I just want to make a point that this includes June Street, Rhodes Ave, Pilgrim Way, and South Street from Washington to Oak.
Thank you, Mr. Forsberg. And Mr. Hassenjäger, the Sewer and Water vote.
Hassenjäger, Sewer and Water. The favorable vote was 5-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Hassenjäger. Any questions or comments? And yes, Mr. O'Connell, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Through you, just again to the general point, in a quick question. My understanding, this is a borrowing article, and I would just raise the issue of, with our free cash, we're adding another 2.5 million to our debt here. So I guess the issue is, can some of that free cash be allocated? And through you, Mr. Moderator, are we anticipating receiving some COVID money through Norfolk County? I don't know if the town administrator can answer that. And can that be allocated for the water and sewer capital expenditures? Again, my concern is that we have $60 million in debt. We have a flux of free cash, and has the board and the town considered using some of that free cash instead of borrowing? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Okay, so a couple points raised there. So this borrowing is not paid via the general fund. It's paid through the water fund. That's why we're borrowing. So you can't use general fund money for water or sewer related items. So it's going against the borrowing for water, not for the general. As far as the $60 million in debt, that is an incorrect statement. We're actually, I reviewed last night the projects that we have. Those projects, which are the police station, fire station, field site, which is about $3 million, all those total just about $29 million. So that is not accurate, that $60 million number. I've seen that around there. And as far as the ARPA and the CARES funds, we haven't received the majority of those funds. Right now, the town has about $1.7 million in our possession. County is still holding on to about 4.5 of that. And I've spoken to the area managers, the Mass Department of Revenue, Division of Local Services. Everyone's advised against spending that money right now until the rules and the guidelines are completely clear. We have until 2025 or 2026 to spend those money. There's no rush to go in and spend that money down until we're completely clear as to how we can spend it. Because the worst thing we could do is spend the money now and be told 2 years from now, no, Walpole, you can't spend that, and we'll have to go back and make that money up somewhere else.
Through you, Mr. Moderator, through the Administrator, is that anticipated money, and I understand you can't use it now, but will it be allocated for infrastructure? Will water and sewer be eligible?
Mr. Johnson?
Yes, they will be.
Okay. Thank you, and I stand corrected on the debt amount. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
O'Connell.
Moderator.
Yes. Mr. O'Leary?
John O'Leary, Precinct 3. Through you, Mr. Moderator, to the Water and Sewer Department. Can someone give me an estimate as to the time frame of completing the proposed work? And also, is there additional work planned in the future of a similar nature?
Mr. Johnson, you looking for someone over there to respond?
I was looking for Scott Gustafson and Rick Mattson. I can address the second part.
Mr. Mattson or Mr. Gustafson?
I can address the second part of it while Rick walks up here.
Sure.
The thought process is to do something similar to what we've done with the roads project. We're actually under Article 9. We're in year 14 of the borrowing for the roads. We started that many years ago. It's paid off. It's helped us be able to keep up with the Chapter 90 funds which have continuously come in low for us. So we want to continue to keep up with our infrastructure. So I think this is the 3rd or 4th year that we've appropriated a borrowing amount through town meeting to address the water infrastructure in town. And as far as the second part of the question, Rick or Scott, I defer to one of you guys on that one.
Scott Gustafson, Superintendent of Sewer and Water, through you, Mr. Moderator. It's currently under design, and we look to construct it during the summer.
So if I understand that, all of this work will be done sometime within the coming summer, next summer, whatever.
It won't all be done during the summer. It'll be longer than that.
Okay, but assuming this is October now, would everything probably be done by next October? Is that a reasonable assumption?
It should be.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gustafson. Mr. O'Leary, you all set? Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. Mr. Lee?
Joseph Lee, Precinct 7. Just a purely practical question. What do we risk as a town by not borrowing this money this year and not replacing these water mains?
Mr. Johnson or Mr. Gustafson?
I think probably one of the people on Pilgrim Way or one of the streets listed there, we've identified a need. I'd hate to be one of the folks who lives on that street and have a water main go right away. There's a need there. There's a continuous need there. So I'm sorry, I didn't see you right there. I was looking. You're moving. So that's my answer.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Ms. Hamilton?
Hello, Allie Hamilton, Precinct 2, member of Finance Committee, resident of Pilgrim Way. We have had yellow water for 6 months, and with this project not anticipated to be finished till next October, we anticipate to have yellow water on our street for the next year. These type of borrowings or articles are really important to continually improve the infrastructure of the pipes in town, as we're not the only neighborhood that has aging pipes.
Thank you, Ms. Hamilton. Any further questions or comments with regard to Article 12? There being none, this motion requires a 2/3 vote as it is borrowing. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. I declare a 2/3 vote in favor. All right, folks. I apologize here, but we have to take care of some matter before we get into Article 14. The town clerk and I debated whether we do it pre or post. And before this, we're going to break into precincts and do a bylaw committee selection. So every 5 years, each precinct shall caucus and select a member to represent the precinct on the bylaws committee. The committee is responsible for reviewing the town's bylaws and presenting to the town meeting at its next annual annual report any revisions or recodifications to the bylaws for reenactment. So the committee is then subsequently discharged upon dissolution of the next annual fall town meeting. So I'm going to have you break into precincts. I'm going to try to do it by yard lines here, I think. So why don't we start with, yeah, so that's a good idea, thank you. So precinct 1, let's see. Precinct 1, can we go back to the backside over there, or, you know, in that general direction over there, maybe by the light stanchion, okay? Precinct 2 towards the benches over there. Precinct 3 over to that light stanchion. Precinct 4 over to the goalposts over here. Precinct 5 over by the media truck. Precinct 6 right here by Mr. Lee. I know you're 7, Mr. Lee. I'm sorry, I'm going to make you move. Precinct 7 over here by Nancy. Actually, I'm going to have you stay there and have 8 come to you. Okay, and precinct 7, why don't you go to the W in the middle of the field? Got to make you move, Mr. Lee, I'm sorry.
And could I just...
Jim, one more sec. Folks, when you're done, one member come down to the front and tell the town clerk who you voted as your member. Yes, Mr. Johnson.
And just a reminder, the Plimpton school bathrooms are also open if you need them.
Thank you.
You know, like it was.
So which McGrath are you? Are you Will? You look like a McGrath. What year are you? Okay, great.
Yeah, right here, or?
Oh yeah, we brought her over before. She was walking over for her precinct way over there. By the time she got halfway there, they were already done. We just brought her back. Okay, yeah.
Excuse me, folks, we're still waiting for 2 and 5 to bring their members down. So the grand prize winner from precinct 2 and 5, please come down to the town clerk, please. Thank you. And we'll get restarted.
I don't have to do any math?
Folks, please return to your seats. We're going to get started up. Okay, folks, I missed something earlier, so while we have a motion to go for a roll call for Article 14, and 20 people stood, we have a motion from Mr. Hickey. It was seconded by Mr. Buckley. 20 people did stand in support, but we have to actually take a vote, and I need a majority in order to make that, and I missed that part, so I want to just correct that right now. So, Mr. Buckley. All those in favor of a roll call vote on Article 14 as the method of voting, please raise your green card and say aye. Opposed, raise your red card and say no. It is a favorable vote, so we will have a roll call vote, thank you, when we come to a vote for Article 14. So normally I kind of read a abbreviated version, but since this is a very important article, you're going to have to bear with me. I'm going to read the whole motion. Middle school debt exclusion, Article 14. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to appropriate the amount of $115,768,814 for the purpose of paying cost of constructing and furnishing a new grade 6 through 8 combined middle school to be located at 625 Washington Street, Walpole, Mass. The same parcel of land as the current Byrd School, including demolition, site preparation, and the payment of all other costs incidental or related thereto, the project, which school facility shall have an anticipated useful life as an educational facility for the instruction of school children for at least 50 years, and for which the town may be eligible for a grant from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, MSBA, and said amount to be expended under the direction of the Middle School Building Committee, and further to authorize the Middle School Building Committee to execute all documents and agreement necessary to effectuate the purpose of this vote. To meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the select board, is authorized to borrow said amount under Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, or pursuant to any other enabling authority. The town acknowledges that the MSBA's grant program is a non-entitlement discretionary program based on need, as determined by the MSBA, and any project cost the town incurs in excess of any grant approved by and received from the MSBA shall be sole responsibility of the town. Provided further that any grant that town may receive from the MSBA for the project shall not exceed the lesser of 52 2/22% of eligible approved project cost as determined by the MSBA, or 2, the total maximum grant amount determined by the MSBA. Provided that the appropriation hereunder shall be subject to and contingent upon an affirmative vote of the town to exempt the amounts required for the payment of interest and principal on said borrowing from the limitation on taxes imposed by Mass General Laws 59, Section 21C, or Prop 2.5, and that the amount of borrowing authorized pursuant to this vote shall be reduced by any grant amount set forth in the project funding agreement that may be executed between the town and the MSBA. Provided further that any premium received upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this vote, less any premium applied to the payment of the cost of issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to the payment of cost approved by this vote in accordance with General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 20, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such cost by like amount. This is a petition of the school committee. Mr. Trudell, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted 13-1-0, favorable action.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. Mr. Gallivan, the Select Board vote.
Select Board voted favorable action 4-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Gallivan. Mr. Buckley, the school committee vote.
The 700.
700. Thank you, Mr. Buckley. And Mr. Forsberg, the capital budget vote.
Capital budget vote of favorable action 600.
Thank you, Mr. Forsberg. Any questions or comments with regard to Article 14? Mr. Flowers?
Hi, Andrew Flowers, Precinct 4, and I'm also on the Finance Committee. I've been on the Finance Committee for 4.5 years. My day job, I'm an economist, and I just wanted to talk about some of the financial aspects of this project. So when we invest in our schools, we invest in home values as well. And so I was looking at some research done by economist Lisa Barrow of the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago and Cecilia Rouse of Princeton. And in their paper, the title of the paper is Using Market Valuation to Assess Public School Spending. Basically what they did is that they looked at what an additional dollar of spending on public schools does to residential property values. And to cut to the chase, the results that they found is that a $1 increase in per pupil spending, both in terms of operating spending or structures, investment in schools themselves, increases the average home value by about $20. So just let's walk through this math here. And again, an analogy here with a home, right? Redoing your bathroom, sure, it costs a lot of money, but it also increases your home value. So let's just do a little math problem here. So if we're going to build this middle school, $116 million, and let's say it has a lifetime of 60 years, like the current middle schools. Given our current enrollment in Walpole Public Schools of around 3,600 students, the translation of this project, $160 million over 60 years, is an average increase in per pupil spending of about $483. Okay, so that translates into what? Well, given this research of a $1 increase in public school spending, a $20 increase in home values, this $483 we're spending more per kid per year. It translates into about a home value increase, a home assessment increase of almost $10,000. So the cost of this project are real, and other people can speak to why we should do it. I encourage you to vote yes. I think it's honestly, it's something we can't afford not to do, and we can talk about all the reasons why at the community forum on Tuesday. Brian Jarvis and many others spoke with great detail about the financial aspects of this plan. But in the long run, I just want you to think about how this is an investment. And yes, the costs are real, but you're going to recoup a good share of these costs in terms of higher home values. And so for that, I encourage you to vote yes.
Thank you, Mr. Flowers. Yes, Mr. Snuffer. Mr. Snuffer, please face me, not the audience. Sorry.
You're a very important man.
I am the important man here. You need to talk to me.
And I love these people.
They can hear you. There are microphones up here to project you back out to them.
Wonderful. You know I'm old school and I don't know much about technology. And is this okay?
You're doing perfectly fine. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Snuffer, Precinct 2. Ladies, gentlemen, distinguished guest members, in order to get a reasonably complete exposure to that which is required for a better understanding of this article, it needs to be segmented into 3 areas for discussion: the building and surroundings, the cost as a complete project, and a deliberative discussion of that which will be taught in the classroom. Today, due to limited time, I will focus only on the cost factor. I do encourage everybody to continue dialogues in 1 and 3. The combined middle school estimate has been said to be $116 million. That is an enormous amount of money. These are very troubling and very complex times for the average person and taxpayer to absorb, and comprehend, because with money, instructions are not included. However, we must try, so let's talk money, while also discussing inflation, the most dangerous and most hidden of all taxes. A textbook definition, inflation is a loss of purchasing power, a general increase in prices, and according to leading economists, Larry Summers, former chief of the World Bank and senior economist for Presidents Clinton and Obama, he, along with other great financial minds, say emphatically and for the record, now is not the time to spend. Why? Because of and due to the upward spiral of inflation. Inflation, whatever happened to the podium? Inflation is at a 30-year high and embedded in nearly every physical item required to build a school, as well as labor, used in developing this facility. Total building costs are required at full inflationary costs. Every nail, every foot of wire, every tile, every paint, and all items used in the construction will be adjusted accordingly, and the net effect will become uncontrolled increases in the range of multiple millions of dollars, something that you pay more for that always had a lesser value. Please make no mistake, these are the very identical same goods, same labor of a few years ago, just at greatly increased costs under the guise of inflation. One potential cost savings idea, and there are few unfortunately, will not be very emotionally pleasant. Delaying or renegotiating potentially is a money-saving strategy. There is another deleterious aspect associated with inflation. In addition to being an onerous tax that has no return on your investment, unfortunately, it is the key that unlocks the door very quickly to an unwelcomed future event called recession. Inflation, recession. You and our 6,000 seniors will be forced to pay for it not only now, but as well for the next 30 years. If this is not discouraging enough, additionally, every person in Walpole will very soon, if not already, be facing heating costs that are anticipated to rise 54%, gasoline approaching $4+ per gallon, supermarket shelves that are running out of product while cargo ships wait weeks to dock. These extraneous costs all add money that is taken out of your pocket, and that adds to your personal debt service on top of all this. You, as do I, demonstrably love all of our babies. We want only the best for them. I fought 50 years, as many of you have, for a better Walpole, and I am proud to say with many successes. However, burning good money is not a solution. It only creates a poverty for the average citizen. I will vote no. You decide what you want to do after all. It is your money, but be aware, inflation will claim it if you don't. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Snuffer. Ms. Gallivan.
Nancy Gallivan, Precinct 8 and school committee member. I'm very excited to have this opportunity to be at this point and to encourage everyone to think about the opportunity that we have to affect the lives of so many students in the future of Walpole. At the same time, I want to assure everybody that this project has been well vetted and reviewed. It's been thoroughly evaluated from multiple angles. As we all know, the two middle schools were built in the 1960s before Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, and back when our country relied on Katherine Johnson and her fellow black women mathematicians to get John Glenn back to Earth rather than relying on the primitive computers of that day. You've all heard this part, but the building systems need to be replaced because you can't get parts for them, and more importantly, the buildings were not built for for this type of education that we offer today. While the need has existed for a while, we understood the rationale for waiting until other projects like the police station, the fire station, the Council on Aging were completed. But now I have a few points I want to share with you today. To the best of my memory, the school committee and administration began the MSBA process in 2015. And at the first visit from MSBA in the fall of 2016, the question was asked of us, is your community going to be supportive of a building project? I remember giving my best honest answer that day and said no, because right now we wouldn't, because we haven't had the opportunity to fully inform our community. But based on my experience, Walpole does step forward when the need is established, when we propose a financially defendable project, and when we do an amazing job of information. I hope today that you will come to the same conclusion that I have, that this project meets these criteria. I believe I was honest in my assessment, and I believe in the voters of Walpole. I hope that you're fully satisfied with our job. Financial approval is the job of town meeting. So here are some important facts for you to know. The message from the start to our architect and our owner's project manager was that we want an amazing, solid, forward-thinking building. We don't care, though, about winning designs or fancy add-ons. What we want is a building that will serve the educational needs of all Walpole students and adapt to the changing times for a very long period of time. Hiring an owner's project manager was a requirement of the MSBA, but it was also a key component because they're constantly immersed in this field and can understand the difficult construction market. They can also advise us based on colleagues and recent experience. Our project cost has been professionally estimated in great detail. The project has almost $20 million in contingencies and has also built in $4.6 million as an escalation factor, since the bids won't be ready until late 2022. After an informed discussion with the school building committee, where Compass advised us to use a construction manager at risk, the project budgeted for this choice as another control measure, since it means both the owner's project manager and the construction manager will have a financial risk if we were to go over budget. But perhaps the most important point to make is that when today's vote is taken, there is no doubt that no one is approving a blank check. Town meeting is the only body that can appropriate funding, and we will be voting for specifically $115,768,814. This is the safety net that allows the voter to realize that there is a limit to our costs. Sorry, I lost my place. This also means that we are available to secure almost $38 million from the state, leaving $78 million to be paid for by the Walpole taxpayer. This translates into $438 a year to the average taxpayer for 30 years, based on some very conservative interest rates. There is reason to think that this cost may be higher than actual, but it is also the reasonable way to present it. Educationally, this 3-story building will have a floor for each grade, and each floor is then subdivided into 3 teams of students, thus providing an innovative and rich educational environment in a manageably sized setting. The equipment and resources in the particular rooms may vary, but every team will have its own well-resourced science lab and access to an additional technology lab on their floor. The science and technology facilities will be the most obvious changes, and we look forward to the related future of these critical departments. Middle school is a key point in a student's life. It's the ideal time to inspire their interests and passions by giving them real world practical exposure to all subjects before they have to specialize. Just as it is so important to give students a solid literacy foundation, their confidence and appreciation of math and science must be established during these critical years. This new building will enhance the way teachers can use the visual and multimedia formats to inform and allow students to expand their experiences. It will also provide the necessary spaces for students who require extra services, as well as the space to offer experiences to all students like robotics, TV and film, and multimedia production. For some students, experiences like these are the hooks that inspire them to learn and grow. This is my second to last point. Understandably so, there have been many questions about the decision to renovate rather than build a new building. As part of the analysis done by the school building committee, this was carefully considered, and the conclusion was that renovating one building would be less expensive than building a new combined school, but that renovating two buildings would be significantly more expensive than building one combined school, especially since no MSBA money would be available for Johnson Middle School in the near future.
Excuse me, Nancy, I just want apologies. Folks, as you know, we have a 3-minute limit. I let it go double this time because of the topic and because the body usually approves it. Is everybody good with letting Nancy continue? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Continue, Nancy. Oh, excuse me, opposed? Continue, Nancy.
Thank you. I'm just about done, but thank you for the consideration. In addition to the negative financial scenario related to renovating, there were other complicating factors included in our analysis. My final point is that after spending much time advocating for Walpole's needs at the state level, the opportunity to secure a $37 million grant from the state rarely comes along to a town like Walpole. It is truly exciting to be able to report to you today that we have secured that commitment contingent upon these two votes. And getting back to one of my initial comments, I hope that your support today solidifies the answer that I gave 5 years ago, that the people of Walpole respond favorably when presented with a well-communicated and financially defendable project. We have a well-vetted proposal, $37 million in state funding, and a unique opportunity today to affect education in Walpole for a very long time, so I respectfully ask for your support.
Thank you, Ms. Gallivan. Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Could I request a clarification? Is the entire cost of the project $115 million, or is that the portion of the project that Walpole is responsible for?
Mr. Jarvis?
115.7 is the entire cost of the project. After grants from the MSBA, the estimated town share is $78 million.
Thank you, sir. So I'll start off by saying that it seems to me that when an organization offers to pay for a third of a project's cost, and if we wait, then we lose that money, then the only choice is to fulfill the project. I've heard a lot of people say that we should hold off, try to come up with a less expensive, scaled back version of the project. Unfortunately, if we did do that, we'd have to scale it back more than 33% because the money won't be around again next year. So are we talking about a 50% scale back where we're building a school that's half as good as the one proposed? That just doesn't make any sense to me. So I don't think any scale back that we could do would actually save any money, considering that a third of the project is being paid for by the state of Massachusetts. And just on a personal note, I attended these schools. I've lived in Walpole my whole life, and I went to Johnson Middle School. And it's interesting that Nancy says about the need for new systems in the schools, because it brought up a memory of mine that I hadn't thought about in a long time. I remember sitting in class one day, and I was a kid, so a boy no less, so I was doing things I shouldn't have been, and I was playing around inside one of the heaters in the room. And I'll never forget the feeling of almost felt like a dog bit my arm. I was zapped. I hit a live wire inside that heater. That is not where I would want my kids to go to school. And I would assume that none of you would either. I'm going to vote yes today on this school project. I will never vote no in the face of education. I'll never vote no for our children. I think that the argument of inflation makes sense, but I think that this project is actually making us inflation proof, because the costs of building this school are not going to go down over the next few years. It's only going to get more expensive, and we're going to be doing it without state money. So this is how we prevent inflation, is by taking care of this issue right now. Thank you for your time, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Mr. Carroll?
Bill Carroll, Precinct 4. I have a question for you, Mr. Moderator. If this passes, what's going to happen to Johnson School? And that's really town administrator. I have an idea for the seniors. What happened?
Mr. Carroll,
Yeah.
I was waiting for you to finish your question. I'll direct it after that. Mr. Johnson, are you going to speak to that? Or yeah.
Sure, I can definitely speak to that. So, at the last meeting, the Select Board discussed this matter. The board decided that let's hold off until after November 2nd to make any firm decisions, but they did review some of the ideas that have been kicked around. Those ideas include moving the Feeney preschool over to that site, moving some of the recreation programming over. I previously mentioned that Blackburn, the auditorium there is very small and doesn't allow for any type of basketball program, and it creates some scheduling issues with the school department and everything on Saturdays and Sundays. We possibly move the food pantry. There's a space need. Walpole Food Pantry is doing a great job with what the service they provide to the residents of Walpole, and potentially moving some of the cafeteria services over there. So that's just four different departments, if you want to say, possibly using that building. Other ideas that have been kicked around potentially include knocking that building down, seeing if we can do an RFP, a request for proposals, to some type of developer to see if they could reuse it for some type of commercial, industrial, residential, who knows what else. Those are just a few of the ideas, but I know the board does want to have a task force or a committee formed to review that. It'll probably take some time, and we'll come forward with some recommendations.
Okay, I understand what he's saying, but I have a proposal, a better proposal than all that. I think the schools should be made to be over 50, and the seniors that paid into the Walpole system, like me for 33 years, should get I remember listening to, should get a tax break going into the over 50 place that they're going to build over there. There's a parking lot there, there's a building there, there's everything there. I've heard just make it into a park because the water system behind it, we have a pumping system behind it. My idea is to you're asking for a school on one side, well, give the seniors something back by giving them a break of an over 50 place to go, because they can't pay their taxes and they're downsizing their house. And it depends on basically a scaling type thing. I paid taxes for 33 years. I was an accountant. I was a programmer. So you understand what I'm trying to say to you? In other words, you're giving back to the community that have to vote for that have to vote for the school system. You know what I mean? It's like yin and yang. You get this for that. That's just an observation. Using the building as a town administrator, to me, you got enough buildings around here to do all that kind of stuff, all that stuff, pantries and stuff like that. You already got them. So my question is to what's going to happen to that school? I think it should be a over 50 place, and you get, if you're a senior, you get a tax break on how many years you paid into the system. Do you understand this? Mr. Moderator, you understand what I'm trying to say?
I'm hearing all your comments as everybody else hears, Mr. Carroll.
Okay. Listen, Walpole, I agree. A new school is what is needed. It's over 60 years old. My kids went to that school. It was old when they went to this school. My kids are gone, but I'm voting for the school. But I would want something back on the back end of that, like an over 50, or do you guys know, Mr. Moderator, when do you start getting a tax break as a senior in town?
Mr. Johnson?
There are a series of, I have them here, programs offered by the Board of Assessors. So, Mr. Carroll, you'd have to, or any resident would have
Is
to
it
apply.
over 65 or is it over 85? Is
It depends. There's a blind person exemption, there's a military exemption, it's an over 65 exemption, so most of them are over 65, but there are some other ones
So
available.
both, if your wife and you own a house and she's not over 65, do you get the break?
Just the first 65.
So if I am 65 and my wife is 61, who gets the break? Do we get the break?
It would be you, the 65-year-old.
Well, we both own the property.
So you'd get a break if you owned it together.
Okay. But I'm just putting it across to you for the future that that facility should be used for our seniors who can't pay, are downsizing and can't pay for their taxes. You understand what I'm doing here?
I understand. You've made it very clear on that
All
point.
right, I'm done.
You all set? Thank you, Mr. Carroll. Ms. Ryan?
Martha Ryan, Precinct 3. Through you, Mr. Moderator. And please bear with me. I can fire up an AED faster than most, but I'm not a public speaker. My husband and Michael and I have raised our 3 children, Thomas, Elizabeth, and Daniel, in Walpole, who are now in their mid to late 20s, and each of them have attended the Walpole Public Schools, starting with preschool through the Walpole High School. Johnson Middle School had a wonderful staff. However, the building was a disgrace when they were there many years ago. I've attended the multiple public informational meetings, which have been well advertised and inviting, and extremely informative. I encourage you to reread the most recent letter from Dr. Goff, which is in your packet. It is most informative, and 2 sentences should be enough to convince you to vote yes. And I quote, "Built in the 1960s, both Byrd and Johnson Middle Schools are near the end of their functional life, with physical and system deficiencies. Issues associated with these schools include, but are not limited to, the facility no longer supports the adequate space and delivery of educational programming to the students in Walpole. The buildings are not fully compliant with the American with Disabilities Act." If those 2 sentences don't convince you to vote yes, I'm not sure what will. I encourage you to vote yes today and again on November 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan. Mr. O'Leary?
Robert O'Leary, Precinct 3. I live right down the street from this, so I know the area pretty well. I think, my opinion,
Nope. Continue. I'm sorry. I'm hand signals over here. I apologize.
in my opinion, I think an appropriate sized school might revitalize the area, but by doubling its size and its population, it's likely to create a situation of further gentrifying the area, and it would speed that process up. And traffic is already bad, it's getting worse, and you would think this would kill neighborhoods as we know them in this area, even up to a half a mile away. Affordable housing will likely take a hit too, a result of increased prices for home values. we should not put in conflict the needs of the old residents and the wants of the newer residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. Yes, please come forward. Sorry. Behind the glasses, I think I know who it is. We'll find out in a second.
Kristen Syrek, Precinct 6
Thank you,
School
Kristen.
Committee. There's been plenty of people who have spoken, and as everyone said, there were a number of opportunities to get information. I just wanted to share one example of what could happen if this vote does not pass today. Lincoln, the town of Lincoln, they voted on an elementary school. It was passed by MSBA. They were going to receive $21 million for a $49 million project, and it was voted down. They continued to bring it back to MSBA. MSBA said no. As Mrs. Gallivan mentioned, you need town support for these projects. They brought it back in 2013, 2015, 2016, and it continued to be rejected. And all the while, they continued to make renovations and support that building. Finally, the building was no longer usable, and in 2018, the town and a ballot vote passed for $93.9 million for the town to pay for it completely by themselves. So we risk funding this project on our own. The needs for these two buildings are not going to go away. If we don't pass this today and on November 2nd, we will continue to fund these projects. So the time is now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Syrek. Sir.
Sean McCauley, Precinct 2. There's something that's been lost amongst all this conversation. Excuse me. At the core, this is a procedural vote. November 2nd, because this is such an enormous project, everyone in town, our communities, our neighbors, will have a chance to vote. I don't care if you want to vote no, but it's not today. Our job as RTMs is to represent the precincts that we come from and our communities. I'm a yes vote so that everyone in my neighborhood, my neighbors, my community, all have an opportunity to then decide if they want to spend $115 million. The arrogance of voting no, in my opinion, is incredible, that my vote would be more important than the neighbors and community. November 2nd is what matters. I will support however the town votes on November 2nd. I represent the people of Precinct 2. My vote is yes, so that they have an opportunity to decide if this project is worth it. This is a procedural vote. Everything else is political theater. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCauley. Excuse me, folks, one moment. Excuse me, folks, apologies for the delay. I'm going to have town council just clarify that procedural vote question, because I think this is important to this body. So just, town council, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Lauren Goldberg from KP Law, representing the town council here tonight, this afternoon. Essentially, what is being asked is a two-step process. Today, the town meeting is being asked to authorize the appropriation of the funding for this project. So appropriating the full amount of the project, which is required by the Massachusetts School Building Authority. Regardless of how people vote today, it will also appear on the ballot on November 2nd. That is that question is, should we be able to raise this money outside of the regular limit on taxes? Both parts of those, or both actions are required to be able to move forward based on the vote here today, because it says contingent upon approval. If the motion was to fail here today and pass at the polls, town meeting would come back. Nevertheless, the way that the gentleman had phrased this is often used to describe votes like this at town meeting. Approval here is an opportunity for the voters on November 2nd to say yes to this project. Disapproval here means that they would have to come back to town meeting after the vote. So it's not just procedural, but both parts need to happen in order for the town to be able to borrow this money.
Thank you, Attorney Goldberg. Mr. McCauley, I know you wanted to come back and say something. Go ahead, Bree.
I would just like to clarify, it wasn't a question, it was a statement. I understand that town meeting has to pass, but at the end of the day, it was a comment on what the role of an RTM is, which is to represent our precincts here at town meeting. I never asked it as a question.
Mr. McCauley, I understood that. I just wanted to make sure there was no misinterpretation. Thank you.
No, that's fair, but no, that's my. I strongly encourage the roll call. I feel like all of us should be held responsible to the vote we put on this field today.
Thank you, Mr. McCauley. Mr. Trudell.
Trudell, Precinct 4 and member of FinCom. Back to the original comments on inflation. The other side of inflation is the time value of money. At this point, we are in a very favorable interest rate position. We've been able to borrow for projects as low as 1.25%. If we were to nix this project and come back 5-6 years with or without state funding, no idea what the interest rates could be, but it could be significantly higher, and you'd be asking for a significantly higher debt exclusion because of your interest payments required to make this. So yes, inflation will impact the cost of the project, but rarely do you see the cost of your project go down 4, 5, 6 years from now.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. Sullivan.
Chandler Sullivan, Precinct 2. After studying the issue of the problem of the aging middle schools in town for the last several years, I think an analogy may be helpful. The argument I hear the most is that people can't afford a new middle school. What I have to say to that is that people can't afford not to go ahead with this project at this time. Let me make an analogy. Say you're a family of 2 and have a sedan that's 10 years old. It has 150,000 miles on it. You get the bad news that the car needs a new transmission, brakes, shocks, and tires. All of this will cost approximately $7,000. While you can certainly pour more money into that car with aging systems at the end of its useful life, at a certain point it makes more sense to upgrade. This will be a hit on your budget, that's undeniable. Sure, you can try and repair the car and get another couple of years out of it, but does it make sense to spend that money on a car near the end of its life? Then you get the news that you're having triplets. 3 car seats can't fit in your car comfortably or safely, and squeezing them in may violate the law. You start eyeing a brand new minivan across the lot. That would solve all your problems, but it's so expensive. Then the car salesman walks up to you and tells you that there's a rebate because it's at the end of the year, and he can give you approximately 1/3 off the sticker price. At this point, wouldn't it make more sense to bite the bullet and go with the minivan? It solves all of your issues. Space, aging car with major systems going, and the price has come down considerably. Well, that's where we are at Walpole. We have a school at the end of its useful life with major systems about to go that will be exorbitantly expensive, if not impossible to fix. Our children and children for years to come should not pay the price for buildings with failing systems. The town has outgrown the current schools. The buildings don't have adequate space to meet modern educational needs. The classrooms, technology spaces, science labs, special education spaces no longer adequate for the town's needs and don't meet MSBA guidelines. This is the fiscally responsible way to get this project done. The need is clear. The answer isn't to pour more money into it, especially if we have approximately $37 million or $37.8 million of state funding. We can't afford not to take advantage of this opportunity. Please vote yes.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Mr. O'Neill, excuse me? Mr. O'Neill.
I was going to say move the question. Thank you, Bill.
We have a request to move the question that's been seconded. This requires, seconded by Mr. Buckley. Excuse me just a second, I'm having a brain cramp here. Two-thirds vote, that's what I thought, thank you. To move the question requires a two-thirds vote, no further debate, so just hold, folks. Return to your seats. All those in favor of moving the question, please raise your cards and say aye. All those opposed, say no and raise your red card. Go, and the question has been moved. I declare a two-thirds vote. So we will now move to a roll call vote. The town, oops, sorry about that. Again. Town clerk is going to come up. We're going to swap places and we're going to vote.
Absolutely. Make yourself at home.
Yep.
You good? Okay.
Megan Ahigian. Danielle Akins. Danielle Akins.
You know what, tell them to raise their green card if they're voting yes.
If you're voting yes, I'll have you raise your green card, and if you're no, you'll raise your red card. Just make it easier to find you.
And shout out.
And shout out as well. That'll get me in a direction. Thanks. Okay. Elizabeth Barrows. Erin Boyd. Nancy Dyan. Jen Giotsis. John Hassenjager. Jennifer Jackson. Glenn Mayfie. Catherine Mayfie. Jennifer McAndrew. Brooke McMillan. Pradeep Mishra. Jillian Morley. Jillian Morley. Ravi Tadori. Brian Foley. Christine Walzer. Where are you? Brian's a yes. Amanda Williams.
Can you pause for a second? Just want to confirm. Yes, yeah, I thought I did something wrong here. So I was fine. So this one didn't vote.
Right.
Okay, that's what it was. Okay. Yes, thank you. That would help.
Okay.
Because yeah, that's because we got to stand.
Oh, okay.
So 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Yeah, it was this one that I missed. It was right in the beginning. So 16. All right, so 16.
Yep.
Two no votes.
Two no
No
votes.
votes.
Two no votes. Okay, precinct 2. Mark Breen. Yes. Ashley Clark. Yes. Thomas Coyne III. Yes. Catherine Crocetti. Yes. Michael Finocchi. Yes. Christopher Fletcher. Christopher Fletcher? Nothing. Barbara Gallivan? Yes. James Cavazos? No. Allison Hamilton? Yes. Rachel Jackson? Yes. Nicole Lane? Yes. Alice Lawson? Yes. John Lombardi? John Lombardi? No vote. Sean McCauley? Yes. Jason McLaughlin? Jason McLaughlin? No vote. Deborah Pedersen? Yes. Clifton Snuffer Jr.? No. Chandler Sullivan? Yes. Ann Walsh? Ann Walsh? No vote. Laura Whalen Bratsis? Yes. 30 to 2, yeah. Okay. Precinct 3. Catherine Turco Abadi? Yes. Ryan Augusta? Yes. Jane Bergen? Yes. Ross Doty? Yes. Janet Fasanello? Yes. Patrick Fasanello? Yes. John Fisher? Yes. Patrick Hinton? Yes. Jennifer Kronakis? Yes. Susan Masterson? Yes. Michael McGrath? Yes. Betsy Mullen? Yes. John O'Leary? No. Robert O'Leary? No. Martha Ryan? Yes. Maureen Smith? Maureen Smith? No vote. Mark Sullivan? Mark Sullivan? No vote. Jennifer Hughley? Yes. Elizabeth Wohler? Yes. Precinct 4. Richard Brown? Yes. Susan Brown? Yes. Josette Burke? Yes. William Carroll? Yes. Paul Connolly? Yes. Virginia Connolly? Yes. Mary Cotter? Yes, okay. Carrie Denizio? Yes. Andrew Flowers? Yes. Justin Hayner? Yes. Stephen Hendricks? Yes. Brad Hickey? Yes. Shannon McCarthy? Yes. David Mellish? Yes. Susan Naughton? Yes. William O'Connell? Yes. Jill Tackix? Yes. Mark Trudell? Yes. Precinct 5. Erica Burden? Yes. Harry Cloud Jr.? Yes. Roland Cuniff Jr.? Roland Cuniff Jr. No vote. Craig Dalton. Yes. Peter Drogan. Yes. Jeffrey Fisher. Yes. Dawn Freiberger. Yes. Kathleen Garvin. Kathleen Garvin. No vote. Bernard Goba. Bernard Goba. No vote. Dana Gondelman. Yes. William Hamilton. William Hamilton. No vote. Mara Harding Clow. Yes. Edward Jakowski. Edward Jakowski. No vote. Amanda LaFleur. Yes. Julie Lowry. Julie Lowry. No vote. Joanne Mulligan. Yes. Bruce Norwell IV. Yes. Christina Shinnick. Yes. Povilis Stashikevich. Paul Stashikevich. No vote. Precinct 6. William Abbott. Yes. Sean Ahern. Yes. Alan Albert. Alan Albert. No vote. Christina Blau. Yes. David Blau. Yes. Mariah Boulos. Yes. Thomas Bowen Jr. Thomas Bowen Jr. No vote. Thomas Brown. Thomas Brown. No vote. B.J. Burke. Yes. Amanda Cronin. Yes. Amy DeVito. Yes. Audrey Grace. Yes. Jennifer Healy. Yes. Jean Hogan. Yes. John Lee. Yes. Wayne Leston. Yes. John Mossatek. Yes. Sally Rose. Yes. Kristen Syrek. Yes. Precinct 7. David Anderson. Yes. Benjamin Barrett. Yes. Robert Buckley. Yes. William Buckley Jr. Yes. Cheryl Karen. Yes. David Clark. Yes. Diane Culhane. Yes. Philip Shekarowski. Yes. Edward Forsberg. Yes. Francis Kenny. Jean Kenny. Yes. Yes on those two, sorry. Ann Krekus. Yes. Joseph Lee. Yes. Michelle Marcados. Michelle Marcados. No vote. Katie Mazzaros. Yes. Gregory Noble. Yes. Lucy Romanowitz. Lucy Romanowitz. No vote. Erica Sharis. Yes. Douglas Shea. Yes. Precinct 8. Brian Connor. Yes. Emilio DiVirgilio. Yes. Paul English. Yes. Mark Gallivan.
Yes.
Yes. Nancy Gallivan. Yes. Richard Giusti. Yes. Kathleen Grulick. Yes. Caitlin Kenny Walsh. Yes. Sarah Katib. Yes. Joseph Maraski. Yes. Beth Musini. Yes. Nancy Niles. Yes. James O'Neill. Yes. Yes. Nancy O'Neill. Yes. Katia Santiago Taylor. Yes. Susan Shockett. Yes. Susan Spendley. Yes. And Lisa Vanderlinden. Yes.
26 to 4, right?
126.
Good job, 15 minutes and 38 seconds. Watch no. Folks, the final count was 126 to 4, so I declare a 2/3 favorable vote. The motion passes. On to Article 15. Street acceptances. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to accept the following roads as public ways listed from A to B, which ways may be voted together, separately, or in any combination, provided, however, that the approval of any or all such ways as public ways shall be treated as each item were voted as a separate article. Emerald Way from its beginning, Olmsted Lane from its beginning, and for each, including any easements and utilities appurtenant thereto, and to authorize the select board to acquire by gift, purchase, eminent domain, or otherwise an easement in said streets for all purposes for which public ways are used in the town of Walpole, and any associated drainage, utility access, or other easements, and further to raise and appropriate, borrow, and/or transfer from available funds a sum of money for the foregoing acquisitions and all incidental and related costs. This is a petition of the Select Board. Mr. Trudell, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action, 13-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. Mr. Gallivan, the Select Board.
Select Board voted favorable action, 4-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Gallivan. Mr. O'Leary.
John O'Leary, Planning Board. In accordance with the street acceptance procedure, the Town of Walpole Planning Board held a residence hearing on October 21st, 2021 for the above referenced streets within the Olmsted Estates subdivision. After holding said hearing, finding no objections, and upon recommendation of Carl Baldoff, Town Engineer, the Planning Board voted 5-0-0 to release the bond in its entirety and proceed with the street acceptance process.
Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. Mr. Lee.
So I was the one that requested this be held, so I figured I might as well at least say that I have received new information since that request, and I now feel comfortable with the article being proposed. We're going to get state money for these streets after they become public ways, and they are up to the standards of other Walpole streets. So I appreciate the article being held, and I'll drop any further questions at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Any other questions or comments? There being none, this requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. All opposed, please say no and raise your red card. I declare a unanimous vote. Favorable. Article 16. Article 16 is a zoning bylaw amendment proposed by the Planning Board. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to amend the zoning bylaws by voting to change the zoning of land owned by the town of Walpole with an address of 2400 Main Street and identify the assessors as map 55, block 99, lot 1, consisting of 63.73 acres plus or minus from R Rural District to PSRC Park School Recreation and Conservation District or anything related thereto. It's a petition of the Planning Board. Mr. Trudell, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action 12-1-0.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. Mr. Gallivan, the Select Board vote.
Select Board voted favorable action 4-0-0.
Mr. O'Leary, the Planning Board vote.
John O'Leary, Planning Board. We found on our October 7th Planning Board meeting that we voted 5-0-0 to recommend favorable action.
Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. Ms. Abady.
Katie Turco-Abady, Planning Board. Just to clarify, this is nothing more than cleanup. The field parcel is currently zoned rural, however, has a zoning, the field parcel is currently zoned rural. However, Walpole has a zoning classification of Park School Recreation Conservation. The property was purchased by the town with the intent to use it as fields. In 2013, Springtown meeting set aside funds to purchase this parcel from the state for the purpose of creating fields for recreational purposes. In December of 2015, the town took ownership of the land with a deed restriction to limit the use of the land to active and passive recreational use. In our zoning, the purpose of rural is to provide an area for agriculture, open space, and lower density single-family residential use. In our zoning, Park Schools Recreation Conservation is to provide for areas supporting low-density municipal, educational, and recreational use. It is nothing more than a correction of zoning classification, and thanks to Jim Johnson, it was vetted. It went to town council, it went to the department heads, and it was found that there was no problem with proceeding.
Thank you, Ms. Abady. Mr. O'Leary.
Robert O'Leary, Precinct 3. Question for town council. As a result of this change, will any modifications such as paving or Title V related go through the proper process of site plan and/or special permit process, zoning board?
Town council.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, through you. It's going to be subject to whatever the zoning bylaw requires.
Because the reason I throw this at you is because a lot of people messed up on this one from day one, and there were no special permits requested, and site plan came cart before the horse. So I wonder whether this is going to continue.
Is that a question or a statement, Mr. O'Leary?
Well, it'd probably be for Mr. Johnson. Question, is it going to continue?
Mr. Johnson?
Moderator, could I have clarification on that?
Yeah.
Is what going to continue?
The question is, are we going to continue to bypass planning and zoning?
I can speak to that. Planning wasn't bypassed. There was a site plan review of the site. Planning, I was actually present. It was, I remember going to planning board 2 separate meetings specifically for this item.
Yes, and I went to them too, but they were cart before the horse. In other words, they came after the fact. They needed to have site plan before this land was cleared. There were a number of questions involved, so you came too late on that.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes, Mr. Johnson.
Respectfully, no one agrees with you on that. and we've vetted this through our various town officials and town council. I'm sorry that you feel that way.
I am correct.
Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. Ms. Dayan.
Nancy Dayan, Precinct 1. I'm just curious if this is necessary. Why wasn't it zoned in that classification to begin with? And does this open us up to any challenges in the future?
Mr. Johnson.
It was zoned this way prior to the town acquiring the property, and this will have to be vetted by, is it the Attorney General who vets these bylaws, Laura?
Yeah.
Yeah, this will have to be vetted by the Attorney General. My only concern was it spot zoning? We're not completely clear on that one, but they'll vet that one way or another. But it was zoned that way when we acquired the property.
Any other further questions or comments on Article 16?
Yes.
Where was the yes? Sorry. Oh, there we are. Mr. Fasanello, go ahead.
Excuse me. With the new, with the change in the status, will it be easier to put up signage and other warnings that there's a field approaching? Noticing that driving on 1A, and I've had a couple of complaints, people were saying, why is it 50 miles an hour coming up a hill where you really can't see the fields? And then there's just one little sign saying ball fields ahead. Because of the rezoning, does it make it, does it give us any better way or authority, if it's a state highway, to change the signage?
Yeah, Mr. Johnson, I believe it's state highway control, right?
It is a state highway. This rezoning doesn't impact that. Unfortunately, we've tried to work with Mass Highway on this. I think over time they'll realize that more infrastructure is needed there because the usage is there, certainly, for that site.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fasanello. Any other questions or comments? There being none, this motion requires a 2/3 vote as a change to the town zoning bylaws. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. I declare a 2/3 favorable vote. Article 17. This is a citizen's petition for an additional package store. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to petition the general court to authorize the select board to grant one additional wine and malt package store license in East Walpole Center, parking relief overrate district, and further to authorize the general court to make clerical and or editorial changes of form only to the bill, unless the select board approves amendments to the bill before enactment by the general court, and to authorize the select board to approve amendments which shall be within the scope of the general public objectives of this petition. This is a citizen's petition. Mr. Trudell, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action 11-1-1.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. Mr. Gallivan, the Select Board.
Select Board voted favorable action 3-1-0.
Thank you, Mr. Gallivan. Any questions or comments with regards to Article 17? There being none, this requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. Aye. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. I declare a favorable vote. That's it, folks. Do I have a motion?
Motion to dissolve.
To dissolve the meeting. Mr. Trudell, I have a second. Carrie Denizio. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? It is unanimous. See you all in the spring, folks. Thank you.